Um, I think the journey from the Howrah Bridge in Kolkata to the Dea has been a fairly long journey with innovation in steel. And essentially, what we are trying to do in between this large sort of time span, between between the first Hooghly Bridge to the second Hooghly Bridge to Dia, there are certain time spaces where multiple small projects are coming up. And I'd like to present 4 of my projects, which explore, some of them are built, 2 of them are built in fact, and 2 of them are on the boards, in fact at the site, so they're going to get built. Essentially, the language of steel has produced large spans, has innovation, has speed, but also, to me, it has created form. And if you see the 2 bridges, it kind of, to me, benchmark the 2 points in which the journey of the city from Kolkata to Howrah, the 2 ends, demarcate 2 time spans, one with intense steel and one with a cable structure. Globally, steel largely had been used to create heights, to create spans, to create icons. But I think what we're trying to use now in steel is to sort of translate into day-to-day projects, simple industrial projects, simple kiosks, simple facades, or simple recreational projects. The intention of the projects are to kind of make both speed, both innovation, both smart technology at the same time to create a certain form and proportion and aesthetic that architects all passionately believe in. In this particular project, it's an industrial project in outskirts of Kolkata. It's a project which is about 150,000 square feet with spans which create a tea processing plant in 3 levels: packaging, storing, blending, etc. And the idea was to sort of create these simple canopy-style roof to blend with the local character and use perforated metals to kind of make a certain statement in the facade. This is, so idea also was to sort of create micro details in terms of structural support, in terms of railings, in terms of truss and purlins, in terms of perforations, and in terms of understanding even the micro details with which 2 elements would sort of combine with each other. When you take this sort of a project, typically one would create a vaulted roof or a standard span structure. But our intent was to sort of kind of create a chasm in the roof, to create some sort of a north light, at the same time create long eaves which would create shading devices and which would create a certain kind of a basic grid system and which would repeat itself into multiple forms to create the large 40 meter by 100 plus 108 meter sort of per floor span. Obviously, the elements of architectural expression, of structural support, of grooves, of suspended cable roof, of metal logos, of roof trusses, of louvers and canopies and signage, all part of the larger steel language that sort of comes together. There's a large intent on our practice, and particularly in my sort of current endeavor, to have a distinct connect between the macro and the micro, to express not only in terms of materiality, but also in terms of how it would be implemented. For a lot of architects like us, and my fraternity is here, we are always struggling to see a production of our projects, our visions translated. And our frustrations largely lie from unrealized dreams. I felt in my case, in a couple of experiences I'll share with you, that steel kind of helps me to sort of counter that, because once it's done on the board, once it's detailed, you're good to go. Unless, of course, challenges like the Dea comes out where you have obviously some issues at site. Every project will have issues at site, but I think nothing stops us from innovating into these sort of forms, while in a way the fact that the whole thing be put together, and from vision to reality, the dilution is the least. And if you see the sort of the other form here, these windows of the structure of this facility are tilted to allow for climatic sort of ventilation. So exactly it sort of angles itself to the particular prevailing wind flow. It creates its pop-up trusses in a way to create large shading devices and canopy. Needless to say, it's another green building of ours, of course rated only, I mean it has to be realized. And passionately, this gray terracotta is a fad, and it sort of, I believe, breaks the mold of just a standard industrial project. You see the junctions here. These junctions allow light to come in. Purlins allow these members to come in, and these are standard deck sheet floors. So essentially, in this particular case, these floors would be casted pretty much, hopefully, once, to sort of one level in 2 months kind of a thing. That's the general schedule. And the outer skin can sort of happen parallelly. Needless to say, services are all integrated and planned so that it goes through the sort of these perforations and the holes in the beam. So it's a thoughtful planning where both in terms of function and aesthetic, there is a balance. This is another project where we explored what we call the bird wing. This is located in a facility called the Bengal Rowing Club in Calcutta. We were supposed to transform this Art Deco building, which is somewhere on the right, in the first phase of the project. And after having done that, the idea was to sort of create some sort of a signature piece that would cover the roof system. As you all know, Rabindra Sarobar is a very, very ecologically sensitive and now quite popular place in South Kolkata. And I felt that the structure around had to has sort of a temporary character in terms of a soft canopy, and visual barriers would be removed. So the idea was here to kind of create a roof system, and which sort of almost mimics the shape and form of a typical Rabindra Sarobar wave or a bird wing. Obviously, this place, you find a lot of birds and landscapes. So there's a certain kind of poetry that I felt could be explored. And of course, to all us architects, there's a terminology by Louis Kahn which says that the brick wants to be an arch. And to me, when I felt sort of sketching this out, I felt that steel says, I can bend too. And so this is a kind of a way in which the steel allows it to bend. As I show you the details of this project, this is of course the larger project, and there's an old heritage structure, and this is a extension of this canopy. This is a broken axonometric of this, which explains to you how this element is essentially a truss with two cantilevers on two sides, which allows its balance. This whole yellow block actually has nothing to do with the primary structure. It's actually a Verandial girder with glass all around, which sort of really sits independently to the overall project. Essentially, the hand sketch of mine, one of the first ones, actually had this whole movement linking the lake to the pool, to the wind around, and this will be the restaurant on top. Again, louvers, purlins, of course, needless to say, the top was used as solar panels, and this being the south side. The Verandial girder was an interesting concept. I mean, I think back in college about 35 years ago, I learned about the Hong Kong building using Verandial girders, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. And I was waiting sometimes in my career to sort of have a small Verandial girder. So this entire restaurant is within that structure, which is not really connected to the base structure. This is, of course, the traditional transformation of the historic part of the project. You have the night view, which essentially tells you how the visual permeability and steel allowing very sleek spans. And I think here, to me, it was an expression of proportion and form in this particular case. Like the earlier case in the factory, it was all about sort of repetition and form and skin design. In this particular case, it was about sort of this old and the new sort of talking to each other in some form. And I think the way in which the permeability of glass and steel allowed me to do this, yet not make it too cold and harsh, but make it a little soft, that was probably what I was trying to sort of achieve. This is the area below, so you can see we just kept the sheets. This sheets actually is a sort of a sheet which was imported from Italy. It's a sheet which is a sandwiched coating. It's a particular brand. And idea was just leave it open, just let it be, and just paint this in pleasing color. This is a standard PU paint. And that's the relationship of the pool side with the pool. And actually here you can see the way the the sort of canopy pops over the verandal girder structure. Everything obviously in steel, the decking, the panels on top, the truss system, etc. And within that, you'll find obviously the metal windows. So it was very aesthetically attempted to tie up all the aluminum work along with the steel work. And of course, the services were planned in a way that the air conditioning systems and the service support would have a little service balcony here. As you can see, more than 12-meter clear span with supports on each side. This is actually almost like a 5-meter cantilever, as you can see. But the bend on the two ends allowed the balance. Thanks to my structural engineer, Mr. Sanjeev Parekh, the idea of translating all my proportions were fairly well transformed into the detail that I wanted. This project is almost done. A lot of my colleagues have seen it, and this is the Bhavanipur Gujarati Education Society. With my growing up years in Ahmedabad, I think I couldn't refuse the Gujarati Society coming to me and requesting me to sort of fix their project. This project didn't have any brief, literally. It was completely, it's a very important building as an educational facility currently operational. The idea was to transform the entire facade and all critical functional spaces along with common spaces. So here, steel here has actually been used largely as an MS structure, but of course, some degree of aluminum and HPL cladding has been used, but largely this metal perforation tried to create a language because there was actually ACs all over, and there's hardly anything one could do in terms of taking it out as a functional building. All ACs could not be changed into a VRV system, but also we wanted to use the module and create some sort of a variation in character. Essentially, the idea was to use fawns and metals and louvers and screens to, by and large, make an envelope that would be screening the services, that would allow certain degree of ventilation in the courtyards to happen. And this is one of our very quick mobile photo shots. We've not really done our official photography because the project is sort of still a couple of months to go. But you kind of allow the screens then to sort of interplay light, since it's, we hardly get project sites in the middle of the city these days, but this is kind of really in the heart of Elgin Road, and it sort of starts to bright up the entire pedestrian movement. So now we're doing the sidewalk also on the either sides of Elgin Road as a part of a extension to the campus, because campus doesn't really have much of open space. And the idea was to sort of use metals and use ACP, which is now rarely being used, and louvers to kind of create a sort of different language. And there's some of the internal shots which transform the balconies. The balconies had become old. So this is a sort of a historic revitalization in a strange way, turning a ugly modern building into a more contemporary typology. This is the side elevation. You can see how the internal courtyard has been detailed out in terms of, again, pretty much skin. So it's an operational building, which is actually classes are going on where the whole transformation is happening. This is one of the process models in the broken axonometric, where we take the entire detailed survey of the project, build this into a model, put the services in sort of Revit and SketchUp, and then start working on the skins and details and work in layers, and then sort of start allowing colors. We also had a blue and white option, by the way. HPL, and these are the screens, how the perforated screens are being used, the vertical louvers. And so each part is then sort of micro details, so in a way that to allow some sort of a gap between the mother structure and the skin, which would not really have the skin sort of stick to the base of the building. And of course, there's a spiral staircase also, which is also in steel. And the last small project is a kiosk. I have been lately quite inspired by doing a whole bunch of kiosks of different scales and sizes. Some of them has been for doing kiosks for vendors, street vendors, to sort of make the street vendors look a little better than they are these days. Vivek had a whole cluster of steel vendors, street vendors in his mall, in his Vishwa Bangla Mela, Binol Mela. This one actually is located in the Royal Calcutta Golf Club, which we are now transforming, both in its historic facade, certain interiors, of course. But one of the most important thing is that they wanted to put up these sort of four kiosks in the entire golf course, and it has to be done like within a couple of weeks. So the idea is to completely make it somewhere else and sort of put it together. We didn't want an ugly square kind of a box to sort of really sit in the landscape context. So the idea was to sort of make a little more sensitive oval, which is again the basic grid, which creates an outline, and then these rims which allow the water to come in from the channel. Simple slatted timber, very basic function. There are essentially a bunch of bar stools, not for drinking as much, but more for coffee, and some two small chairs, toilets mainly, so the golfers could come and sort of take a pit stop in their long day and have water and then sort of move on. And these would be strategically located. And the idea of sort of exploring this whole phenomenon of kiosk is to sort of create these temporary systems that would not only serve for rich people playing golf in RCGC, but also this whole module being transformed onto creating vendor kiosks or creating sort of studio kind of things in a more form-centric way. Here, again, the steel beams have been used, and the basic form has been structured in a way that the outside gutter could be made in a way that it could be a cleanable gutter. So the rim sort of is a cantilevered portion. I think one of the most important things I feel that steel's allowing us today, at least in my practice, is to allow that innovation parallel to implementation, because I think that the way we are designing a form could be actually sort of done in certain ways. I know Kamal Bhai is designing a large steel project, which is really sort of coming up in a signature project. Deya is, of course, the biggest signature of our times. I feel that as we sort of focus more on form and use steel as a material as an alternative in making projects in places that we can't build, whether it is a golf course or whether it's a hilltop mountain resort, where I could transport things, it's very important to then keep the sensitivity of steel and not sort of divert it into a more truss kind of a span and a standard industrial material. So I think that's the big questioning point that we have in our practice in this vertical. Thanks.